Welcome, everyone, to the PFF Fantasy Podcast, IDP edition. I'm Jon Macri, and today we got an absolute monster of an episode for you good folks, where we're diving into every single team's linebacker core, giving our expectations for each unit to get you good people ready for fantasy drafts ahead of the regular season. We're talking who's wearing the green dot, who's going to play an every down role, who's coming off the field in sub packages, and so much more. Now let's get it. All right, with so many linebackers to go through, I couldn't do it alone. So who better to help me sort through every single team situation than the Green Dot King himself from the IDPshow.com. Mike Woellert is in the house. Mike, what's up, man? You ready to talk some linebackers?
Oh my God, I'm always ready to talk linebackers because I don't know crap about safeties. I don't know anything about safeties. I think we're done with defensive ends, but yeah, always ready to talk linebackers. And I've always loved the 8-bit intro, and I've actually found 8-bit WWE entrance themes, and I've been going down the rabbit hole of listening to 8-bit entrance themes. So I found Stone Cold, Roman Reigns, CM Punk, all those, and they're just so awesome.
Oh, they're so good, man. Yeah, they bring me back to like those old video games and just like, and then there were like, when, the old wrestling games and stuff, you'd get like I don't know if they had the individual theme musics or whatever, but like they'd have like the general like WWF theme or something like that. And it was so good, man. Yeah, I'm sure those would be a lot of fun, but yeah, it's always fun to talk linebackers. I mean, there's, a lot of, we were saying before, linebackers are such a popular IDP position because there's so many tackle heavy leagues, right? Where the main thing that matters above all else is linebackers, right? Those are the guys that are getting the majority of the tackles. So there's a lot of IDP leagues where, linebackers are the only ones you're really starting. So we got a big episode dedicated for those people. Like I said, we're going to go team by team for this episode. It does typically end up being one of our longer episodes of the year because there's just so many linebackers to discuss and so many different situations for every team. But again, we're going to look at who are kind of the safe bets for full-time snaps, which matters more than anything else. We'll also touch on what the expected usage is for the team's secondary linebackers. We'll include where we have them ranked, kind of thing. I'll also try and include some of the more man and zone heavy teams, who they are as well, because as we've noted many times this offseason, for those people that have listened, outside of playing time, like there aren't a ton of edges to be had for the linebacker position, but one of those smaller edges to help project tackle efficiency is how often a linebacker is going to be on or in man or zone coverage. And with zone coverage obviously being the more optimal deployment, just looking at the tackle efficiencies from each specific coverage, man coverages yield a below average tackle efficiency for our linebackers, and zone coverages yield an above average tackle efficiency for our linebackers, right? So if I'm saying something like linebacker friendly defense or not, that is a lot of kind of what I'm alluding to in that situation. So Mike, I know, we were kind of touching on this a little bit before as well, like with the man and zone coverage stuff, and I could pull up the slide as well for our YouTube crowd just to kind of see what a breakdown is of what those zone coverages are, what the difference is with the tackle rates. You'll see that every single zone coverage we have is above average compared to average tackle efficiency for the linebacker, and every man coverage is below average. So how are you kind of like attacking the position when thinking about this kind of stuff, I guess?
Yeah, for me, it snaps really above all else.
Yeah.
Just, you're on the field, you have the opportunity to make a play, but this kind of comes into our terminology and the antiquated schemes and everything. So, for probably the better part of my time playing IDP, it was always, we want the linebackers, or we want a middle linebacker in a 4-3, and we want a weak side linebacker in a 4-3, and we want the inside linebackers in a 3-4. Well, over the last several years, those 4-3, 3-4 schemes are now like base schemes, and those aren't even played anymore. I mean, our new defenses are like 4-2-5 for the most part.
Mhm.
So I think when you're thinking of linebackers, don't think in terms of 4-3-3-4. Think of man zone. I think the man zone is now becoming that new 4-3-3-4 linebackers. I think the 4-3 and 3-4 comes into play. I think it's definitely interesting to note, or something to note for like edge rushers, because some edge rushers do better from their hand in the dirt. If they're in a stance, they have a better get off than if they're playing more from that standing position and getting that get off from a standing position. So that's certainly worth noting when it comes to that. But linebackers, like I said, I'm not thinking of a 3-4, 4-3 inside, weak side, because more or less you got two linebackers on the field at the same time, and they're just shifting between left and right. So that's really how I think about it. But yeah, that's kind of the new 4-3-3-4 is this man zone scheme, because a lot of linebackers, probably half of their tackles are coming in pass coverage.
Right.
If you look at it, it's no longer run defense. Yeah, it's nice for a linebacker to play. We'll have matchups that are against run heavy teams. That's fine. But with the more pass heavy, linebackers are getting anywhere between, I don't know, a third to half their tackles in pass.
Yeah, it makes a difference, right? Like, you want linebackers that aren't going to be turning their back to the quarterback chasing downfield. You want them to kind of sit in zone. That just gives them a better opportunity to face the ball, make those tackles, just as, kind of a simple way of looking at it. But like Mike said, there's a lot more that kind of goes into it, right? So, yeah, those are the kinds of things that I'll be tracking in season as well, like man zone coverage rates and stuff in the IDP fantasy report. We did an article, I'll link in the episode description as well, projecting linebacker tackle efficiencies for each team based on expected usage of man and zone and things like that, just to kind of get an idea of who these man friendly or linebacker friendly defenses are versus the ones that maybe aren't. So,
but also at the same time, don't let it like totally be like a guide. Like, oh, I'm not gonna play I'm not gonna draft Bobby Wagner because he's maybe in a more man heavy. I'm gonna just not take Bobby Wagner, and I'll take Christian Harris, who's in a I don't even something like that. So don't let it completely guide, because those guys with a track record, they have a track record for a reason. They can pretty much play anywhere. But anyway. Yeah, I digress.
No, that's fair. So we'll get into it here in just a sec. But before we do, I do want to let you all know that you can dominate your fantasy league this season with PFF. Use code FANTASY25 to get 25% off your PFF annual subscription. Gain access to our fantasy mock draft simulator, draft rankings, live draft assistant. For those that are familiar with our rankings page, our new and improved rankings page, that is, we're adding IDP rankings to that as well. You'll get the draft rankings, dynasty rankings, rookie rankings, and then of course our weekly rankings from me for IDP. So they will all look very nice and new and have new features kind of planned for the future for what that'll look like as well. So make sure you're subscribed, and if you aren't, you could use the code FANTASY25 at checkout. Go to subscribe.pff.com. Again, FANTASY25 and get 25% off your PFF Plus annual subscription. All right, Mike, let's get into it. As per your request, we're starting with the AFC North and your Cleveland Browns. One of the messier linebacker situations to kind of sort out in seasons past. So what are you expecting from this group in 2024?
Well, I thought there would be a little bit of consistency because they let Anthony Walker go. They let Sion Takitaki go. They let Jacob Phillips go. So they brought in Jordan Hicks, who is a steady veteran, who had the label of injury prone, but over the last several years hasn't missed very many games. He had that freak leg injury that really only caused him to miss 4 games, but he still came back and was that leader on the defense. I think they brought him to be the same, but unfortunately they're not really disclosing much on the injury. It's just being called an injury, and he's week to week. So I don't really know what's going on with that injury, but I had him projected to be that leader, that, the wear of the dot. I never really thought Koromoa was going to get it, but I think Koromoa almost now needs to be the leader of the defense now, not necessarily wear the dot, but he needs to be that playmaker if Hicks is going to miss some time. So I think JOK is played himself into a larger role. I think he's definitely earned more snaps. Obviously, he's earned the contract. So how I'm looking at the linebacker situation right now is I'm probably taking JOK first. I think he's I would imagine I mean, I got to believe an 85% snap share or higher at this point. I mean, he's one of your top playmakers. I don't see why you wouldn't want to have him on the field. Muhammad Diabate is probably the backup to Hicks. So again, if you're kind of in a deeper league, that's the backup, and he's been the one that's been calling the plays. Until we get anything noted on Hicks's injury, I'm ignoring him right now. You get a soft tissue injury, you get an injury. This is supposed to be when you're the healthiest. Mm-hmm. And now we're just seeing a lot of injuries pile up already. And we say the same thing every year, injuries happening early every year. And it just seems, and it's just football. So for me, with Hicks kind of already dinged, I kind of have Hicks or JOK as kind of that LB1. He'll kind of be that LB1. I think he's probably going to be the more productive linebacker of the group. And with, I think the Browns are right now a little bit more not man heavy, but it's a little bit, it's definitely even. I think it's been a 55-40 split. They trust their corners to guard man-to-man. They get that 4-man rush. They want the pressure. So that's kind of how I'm seeing the defense right now. I trust JOK more as an LB2, LB3. That's kind of that's kind of where I've been getting him. So I'm not going to draft him as my LB1. I'll be completely transparent with that. But I don't have a problem with him as a second or a third.
I think that's fair. Yeah. I mean, like you said, I don't think you're the only one drafting JOK ahead of Jordan Hicks. I do think, if Jordan Hicks was healthy, I probably would be putting Jordan Hicks ahead of JOK for now. Like, we just don't know what his situation is right now, but Hicks being healthy, like you said, you do expect him to kind of wear the green dot when he's back. Hopefully it's before the season starts, so we could kind of get an idea, unless you're a JOK manager, in which case, yeah, you don't want Jordan Hicks back necessarily because it does, the less linebackers in that rotation, the better it is for JOK. But it does make Hicks, at least, when healthy, the more likely guy to stay on the field for all 3 downs, right? Last year, I think they barely even really had that, even like one full-time linebacker under Jim Schwartz, where I think the weekly LB1 played on average 83% of defensive snaps. The LB2 played 67.4%. Like, those numbers suck if they continue. I'm not overly confident that they won't, continue this season. Like, they very well might. Like, they also brought in Devin Bush, and I know they still have plans for guys like Tony Fields as well. Maybe it's similar in a way that they deploy JOK. But if they're looking to rotate guys again, even with like a relatively unsexy personnel to do it, like, I don't think that they'll hesitate, just because they've had success with that formula. Even last year, you look at their linebackers. I think it was Anthony Walker, Sione Taki, JOK. It's not like it's probably better, but it's not that much better than Jordan Hicks, Devin Bush, JOK this year, right? Like, at least not a huge difference that is going to change like a complete philosophy change for them. But there, like I said, there's definitely a lot of people hyped about JOK this season. We talked about him last episode with Tom in the overvalued and fades episode. He's being drafted as LB19 right now. I think just over some safer bets for full-time playing time, which, like we said at the top, playing time is the most important thing. Like, if you're, if we're expecting 85% with JOK and Jordan Hicks in the lineup, it makes me a little bit weary about him as an LB2. Like, we if we're looking at last season as an example, right, there were 39 linebacker roles that played a higher rate than that 85%, right? And again, nothing matters more than playing time. And for the Browns too, like, they are one of those more man heavy defense. They played the most man coverage snaps in the league last season, right? So like you said, if it's 55-45, most teams do play more zone than man, right? That's just normal, but it's how much man they play, and the Browns played way more man than everybody else. So that's the only thing that worries me about him. Like, just as far as like top 20 projection goes, like I said, with like you said, I think more LB3 for me is where I'd feel comfortable with him. Right now, I have him and Jordan Hicks ranked right beside each other. But again, waiting to kind of do the update there, see what we get for the rest of the preseason before kind of moving one more up the list to try to figure out who we'd rather have in that situation. But yeah, like you said, not looking great for Jordan Hicks. Not a great start anyways. All right, let's go to the Cincinnati Bengals now, where we got Logan Wilson, we got Jermaine Pratt. Logan Wilson, he gets a pretty good rep for IDP because, he's made some big plays to boost his stats. He's also a name named Logan, which is after Wolverine, obviously, which makes him a badass.
Not the drunken Logan.
Yeah. But yeah, like my only concern for Wilson really is that he's yet to kind of show that he can be like an elite tackler at the position. Like he's had good tackle totals, but it just comes from his playing time, right? Where last year he actually finished nearly 21 tackles below expected. That was a 6th percentile mark. So really inefficient there. Same thing with Jermaine Pratt, even like he was 18.5 tackles below expected. That was a 12th percentile mark. So both of these guys, Wilson especially, like delivered below average in our scoring in how much of their production came from tackles alone. And those big plays are incredibly kind of unstable to rely on. So it's probably another one of those duos that I'm tempering expectations for this season. In Cincinnati, kind of similarly to Cleveland, but maybe not as much. Like I have Logan Wilson as LB 26. Jermaine Pratt, I have LB 53, so lower than that. I'm not expecting a full-time role for him, so he falls down the ranks for me. But any more optimism that we get a better season here from Logan Wilson, Jermaine Pratt?
Well, I mean, yeah, Logan Wilson always seems to be a guy I seem to over project every year. I think I have him at about 130 at about 135 tackles. And then last year was the first time I think Pratt reached the 100 tackle mark. So I think both linebackers were on the field for 90% or more of the snaps. Because Cincinnati used 2 linebacker nickel packages, I think, for around 90% of the snaps. Which is making someone like Akeem Davis-Gaither just unusable right now. But yeah, I mean, between the two, Pratt had 118 tackles, so I think that's putting him in kind of that LB3, LB4 territory. So Cincinnati was a pretty consistent 2 linebacker defense. I don't see anything why that would change.
Yeah.
As of again, we talk about snaps, but the number of linebackers that are playing, I think there was only one linebacker that played 100% of the snaps. I think it was Bobby Okereke, but everybody else, I think you had about 19 that played. I think it was 90% or more, and then there was another 6 or 7 that were in that 80% range, if I remember correctly. So while we want the guys that are on the field for 90% of the snaps or more, there's not many of them to be had, because when you get out of that top 20, those top 25, you're kind of now, all right, you're not throwing darts, but they're still usable. But yeah, you definitely don't want to reach for him. Logan Wilson I like, but for whatever reason, I seem to always just pass over him. I don't know why. I don't know if it's just a conscious thing, or it's like, it just, there always seems to be linebackers I'd rather have than Logan Wilson. But Pratt, I don't mind as a 4th or 5th.
Yeah, getting Pratt a little bit later is probably the better play, right? Like just value wise, like you said, around 90%. Like, yeah, it's not exactly a full-time role, but it's pretty close. Again, he wasn't the most efficient tackler, but he played. He was healthy, right? That was the main thing. Him and Logan Wilson, they were healthy. They played the full season. So, that's where, if they do miss time, you'll see probably a bigger drop in their production. But I'm fine with either one of them. We talked about this last episode. If these guys are playing, 90 to 100% of snaps on an entire season, like they have top 20 potential, every single one of them. It's just a matter of how often they're going to make big plays. And, Wilson has made some big plays in the past, but it's, again, just not something that's overly stable. But let's go on to Pittsburgh here. We got Patrick Queen. We got Landon Roberts / Peyton Wilson / Cole Holcomb. Mike, where are you on these Pittsburgh Steelers linebackers?
So what's funny is Pittsburgh has not had an elite LB1 for several years. And they've had good linebackers. I think the last like elite linebacker you almost could say was maybe Ryan Shazier, but
that's what I was thinking. Yeah,
there hasn't been that elite guy that has been like a steady 140 tackle guy, 150 tackle guy. So Patrick Queen going to Pittsburgh, maybe not the most ideal. And his contract is kind of funny because basically I think it's just a 1-year deal if you look at it. There's an out for them even for next year. So, I mean, Patrick Queen, he's probably going to play a 3-down role. So I'm probably going to call the plays. I don't think I don't think he's ever called the plays. So it's going to be interesting to see how he does as the signal caller. Everything that Tomlin has said, yeah, he's gotten in the role. He's vocal, all that. So we'll see. But he wasn't that. I mean, he was okay. I know some of the PFF grades were not great until Roquan Smith came to Baltimore, and then his game kind of improved. So I think I'm fading Queen. I don't think I've never really had him in a queue. I've never really targeted him. I'd almost rather take some upside with Peyton Wilson, who you can pretty much, I think, get for practically free right now. I mean, I overheard on a broadcast, I mean, Landon Roberts hasn't been a true 3-down guy, has never been really a full-time guy. He's always been one of those guys that's a pretty decent run stopper, pretty good run stuffer, but you'd always hear, oh, but Landon Roberts not good in coverage. Oh, he got beat, So he's always coming off in those nickel or dime packages. So I know on the Pittsburgh broadcast last week, they said with Patrick Queen not playing, Peyton Wilson is playing and would possibly get the start alongside Patrick Queen. So I'm almost willing to kind of use or bank on some of the upside with Peyton Wilson. He had from what I remember, he had a good game. And, if you're getting him as a 4th or 5th or even 6th linebacker, he's not going to kill you if he doesn't pan out. You just drop him and pick somebody else up. But in terms of the Pittsburgh Steelers linebackers, I'm kind of avoiding, in all honesty. I think I've got Queen projected. I've got Queen projected at about, a little over 1,000 snaps and about 120 tackles. So we'll see how he does without Roquan.
Yeah, that's the thing, right? Like you said, the Steelers linebackers, like they've constantly deployed like a pretty heavy rotation there, like especially amongst their, 2nd, 3rd, 4th linebacker, like not as worried about like the snaps for Queen. I think 1,000 snaps if he's healthy, like I think that's a fair projection for him. It's just, what he's going to do with those snaps. Like he was another one that we highlighted in our fades episode with Tom, because he was being drafted as like a top 10 linebacker when we were looking at the ADP. And like, again, it's very possible that he can get there. He can outperform, where I have him ranked. I think I have him ranked as LB 27 right now. But again, it's possible for every single full-time linebacker with some good efficiency, with health, with big plays. And he does at least check the full-time linebacker part of it. My issue with him is that he's been so big play dependent in the past, like similar to a Logan Wilson or even JOK last year. He posted 79.3% of his fantasy points from non-tackles. And he's another guy that just hasn't been an elite tackler in the NFL. You look at his past 3 seasons, he's delivered well below expected in tackle totals every year, like 15th percentile and lower type bad. Now he's going to a defense who, again, another more man-heavy defense than average, which could hurt efficiency, possibly. But he's also capable of getting to top 10, top 20 on any given week. But there's just, as far as rankings go for me, like there's just better projected roles to also kind of get there. And that's what keeps him lower for me. And I'm with you. He's not somebody that I'm targeting in drafts, especially at the cost. And, you mentioned Peyton Wilson, Landon Roberts, like the usage from like the first week of the preseason, both those guys started the game. They both played 100% of snaps, which not uncommon in the preseason for teams to not use like their typical deployment either. But I think the telling part for me for the preseason usage was that Roberts left the game first. Like I think it was just one snap into the second quarter, like with the rest of the starters, where Wilson stayed in the game late and into the third quarter. But again, that's not uncommon for a rookie either, like for younger players that coaching staffs want to see more of. So we'll see, I think, second week of preseason is usually kind of our best bet at what we're going to, be able to expect from these teams. So I'll be interested to see how that one shakes out this week for sure.
Yep, I think so too.
And then the last team in the AFC North here, the Baltimore Ravens, we got Roquan Smith, we got Trenton Simpson. I mean, Roquan Smith, I have him as LB2. Trenton Simpson's going to be moving up as well. Like, I think probably Trenton Simpson's the more interesting names here because, I mean, Roquan, we kind of know what he is. He's locked into a full-time role, but Trenton Simpson looks locked into that LB2 role right now. So will he be an every down linebacker like Patrick Queen was for them last year? That's kind of the question, right? They also brought in Eddie Jackson at safety recently as well. And this is also a team that has kind of a history of one linebacker looks with three safeties on the field. So I'm wondering at least a little bit if, whether it's due to inexperience in the league for Simpson or, just not feeling fully comfortable to unleash him on 100% of snaps yet. If they could lean into more DBs than linebackers, especially on like obvious passing downs. So that could hurt Simpson's potential ceiling, but we won't know until all the starters are on the field. So hopefully, again, we get that this weekend. But it's a nice duo here to potentially target. Simpson obviously being the later target to take.
Yeah, I think it seems like the coaching staff has been pretty happy with what he's been doing. I mean, they entrusted him to wear the dot last week in their preseason game. He felt really comfortable with it. He even outright said he loved wearing it. So when you have that level of already comfortability in a defense, then I think that's certainly a good thing. Yeah, last year the Ravens were, I mean they ran two linebackers for the most part, close to 100% of the time, which was very rare. And my concern is the same with yours. You bring in Eddie Jackson, and then you've got Kyle Hamilton, you've got Marcus Williams as your safeties. So will they do some big dime or some, more three safety looks? That's noted that one of my articles is that, will that kind of hinder some of his upside? But even if he gets, again, 85 to 90% of the snaps, that's still a pretty good snap volume for the second year linebacker. I mean, he must have done enough in that last game against, that last game in the preseason. He played 26 snaps for them to think, okay, we don't need Patrick Queen anymore. Who's, was a 4-year vet. I mean, they to allow someone like that to go. So, but yeah, I've got Simpson kind of in that top 35. I actually kind of wrote him up as a fade and a breakout. I was like, can a fade, can a breakout be a fade, or can a fade be a breakout? I mean, maybe am I at the nexus of the universe here? Right? Yeah. Because his ADP was so high at the very beginning. I think when I wrote it, when I was looking at ADPs and writing, I think he was like an LB 25, and I'm like, okay, that's a little bit too high without really knowing really much of anything, but his ADP has dipped. He's kind of in that, I think he's been in that mid to low LB 30s. So 30, 35, 39. And I'm comfortable with him there as maybe that as a high upside breakout as an LB3. But no, I wasn't gonna, something about it as that LB2 price was just a little too steep, but seeing him play, I think I'm a little bit more comfortable with him now.
Yeah, he looked good. He looked comfortable. Again, like it's small sample size stuff, but yeah, that price is way too high. I think, especially if you said like, we're looking at maybe an 85% roll, like without that guarantee, like of knowing 100%, like again, there's just, more safer options for snaps that we should be targeting, but doesn't mean he can't have a breakout season, like you said as well. So let's go to the AFC West now, and we'll start with the Super Bowl champion Kansas City Chiefs. Mike, we got Nick Bolton, we got Drew Tranquil, we got Leo Chanel. I mean, Nick Bolton's the one, he missed a ton of time last year. But yeah, still among kind of the elite tacklers at the position. So I guess how you kind of treating this group, because Steve Spagnuolo has been a defensive coordinator that we've lamented in the past,
Yep.
complained about his usage and everything, and it's settled down a little bit more now that Nick Bolton is essentially the full-time linebacker, but still not necessarily full-time role for LB2 there.
No, the LB2, I think, was, if I'm not mistaken, I think they're at about 50 to 60% of the snaps. They were actually one of the top defenses to roll out like their base, their 3 linebackers. So I think they rolled out 3 linebackers at like a 34% rate. So with that, I actually lowered my expectations a little bit on Bolton. I think I had him at near 160 tackles. I think I lowered his projection today to about 140. I'll be honest, the injury concerns already are there. Without really knowing what happened with him, I'm just kind of tempering the expectations a little bit. But Drew Tranquill I think Spags does like Tranquill. I think he's a solid LB2, and I think is someone you'd probably want on your kind of your watch list not necessarily a handcuff, but to like bring in because if Bolton goes out, he's next man up. I mean, he's calling the plays wearing the dot. So I think he's that next man up. So, but outside of Bolton and Tranquill, I mean, maybe Leo Chanel in like best ball leagues as your like LB6 and LB7, when he gets kind of those ceiling weeks when he plays like 18 snaps and he'll have like 6 tackles and a sack in a freak week. So from a seasonal standpoint redraft, I'm going Bolton first. Obviously, if I don't get Bolton, I'll probably try to block the Bolton owner, maybe get Tranquill as a 6 or a 7. But again, if Bolton goes, I don't really seek out the Kansas City linebackers.
Yeah, like I'm with you. Like I'm not like overly into like handcuffing linebackers all that much, but Tranquill, like if you're gonna do it, like Tranquill's kind of the one that I think makes the most sense, where he's not likely full-time with Bolton in the lineup, though he can still be productive. But if Bolton is out of the lineup, then he's like a highly productive player who could step into a full-time role, right? So there's that upside with Tranquill. But again, you're hoping for a Bolton injury. I know he missed a ton of time last year. He was banged up in this offseason already with the elbow, but he was back at practice. So that was good to see. But again, Nick Bolton, among the elite tacklers, really like 98th percentile in tackles versus expected in 2021 and 2022. And he was 85th percentile last year, playing less than 500 snaps. So I still really like Bolton. I mean, hopefully the injury stuff doesn't turn out to be, a constant for him. But when he's on the field, like I think he's going to be one of the more highly weekly drafted or highly weekly ranked linebackers for me as well, just because
I think his tackle production kind of lies somewhere in the middle of that 22-21 season. So that's kind of where, I think he kind of lies somewhere in the middle. I don't see 170 again, but he's definitely capable of more than 116 for sure.
Yeah. And then the 116 year, he wasn't even a full-time linebacker, right?
That was some real high tackle efficiency.
Yeah, it was just insane. All right, let's go to Denver now. We got Alex Kingleton and Cody Barton. So Kingleton, I love this guy. He's LB4 for me. Like he's one of my favorite linebackers to target. And then we got Cody Barton, who I have lower, but he's another one that I could be potentially moving up here just to kind of as we see the preseason unfold, because I'm not like fully sold on Barton being a full-time player. There's also Jonas Griffith, who's a name to watch that is apparently competing with Barton. Barton did get the start in the first preseason game. He played 100% of the snaps. That isn't something that Denver did last year. There were 2 linebackers that played full-time snaps. Singleton was the only full-time guy. Josie Jewell, when he was on the team, he was around 76%.
He was about 70. Yeah, he was in the mid to low 70s.
So, and then, you look at Barton, like he doesn't scream full-time linebacker to me. He wasn't even that for Pete Carroll, who almost always had 2 full-time linebackers. And he was only really out of necessity a full-time linebacker last season because Washington's linebacker core was so bad and had so many injuries. Like they had Jamin Davis, who they hate. Then it was like David Mayo, Kaliki Hudson. So
Ugh.
not a good group, right? So that
Yeah.
it made more sense for Barton to play full-time snaps there. But I think this season we're looking at Singleton as the very clear target in the majority of leagues, and then those deeper
Yep.
leagues where we can use a linebacker that we can afford to not have playing 100% of snaps, then Cody Barton would be kind of the later target there. But I do feel very optimistic about Singleton. Again, LB4 for me. So
Yep.
love that tackle production. It's just insane.
Well, what a 18 or 19% tackle rate on 1,000 snaps is just insane. And I'm with you. I'm kind of, everybody saying, oh, Cody Barton he's not my guy this year. I mean, the Broncos, I think, like I said, we're a 2 linebacker system for 70% of the snaps. They had 3 linebacker for about 10% of their total snaps. So they were in that single linebacker dime for about 20. Josie Jewell was productive, but I think he's a better overall linebacker than Cody Barton. So I'm with you. I've written up as Jonas Griffith as a guy that could eat into that rotation and eat into Barton snaps. So really for me, it's Alex Singleton, and I'm kind of moving on from there.
Yeah, I think that's fair.
Yep.
Let's look at the Chargers now, because this is a group a little bit messy because we don't know exactly what
this is. I think this is one of the messier ones. There isn't many this year, which is good.
Yeah, but
this one stands out as just like a whole lot of yuck.
Yeah, it does, right? And the good thing is, they could potentially be playing a rookie linebacker, right? We hope, because we got excited about that. We always love to see that, as rare as it is. But Junior Colson's been injured, right? He's missed some time in camp, but he is back now. Actually, he came back yesterday, I think it was.
Yeah, came back yesterday, but was with the second team.
Yeah, but he made like a good impression, right? Like you said, still listed behind Diane Henley for now. But again, I wouldn't be surprised if he took over that starting spot at some point. Again, just the familiarity with Jesse Minter and Jim Harbaugh from Michigan. Like, I think, it makes sense that we could see more Colson this year. But yeah, anybody else on this Chargers linebacker group? Like, I have Denzel Perriman pulled up on the screen here because I do expect him to be the starter, but any interest in Perriman? Do you believe in him for a full season?
I don't really. It was good to see Henley wear the dot last week. Played okay. But I think with this year might be the year that it's kind of knocked some sense into me, and not to go overboard on rookie linebackers, because it's like every year these rookie linebackers, they get into these spots and it kills everybody. And you know what? I don't think it's the case. As much as Colson has that familiarity with Harbaugh and Minter, he's still missing out. The pro game is completely different than college. So he's basically missing almost an entire rookie training camp potentially, but he's just getting in now, and you've missed some valuable reps, some valuable time, some of that valuable time that he could have had, learning, being on the field. So really for me, I'm probably targeting actually Diane Henley. That's kind of who my late round flyer is. If I miss out on Colson, because I think he's getting drafted, I think still way higher than where he should be. I'm not expecting a full-time role out of the gate at all for Colson. I think if it does come, like you said, a lot of these rookie linebackers are really making their mark kind of halfway through the season, 2/3 of the way of the season. Obviously in an event of an injury, he becomes very valuable, obviously, but I'm not targeting Perriman, but Henley's the kind of the guy I'm looking at, and I'm letting someone take Colson higher, and I'll still scoop up some of those guys that are in a safer role.
Yeah, I think it's definitely possible. Like, Colson ends up, playing with the twos in the preseason game if he's dressed for it, which I would imagine he would be this weekend, and Henley and Perriman get the start again. And you know what? Most of these guys, they are Perriman, Henley, they're not like highly drafted either, so I don't mind like taking the shot on these guys late. Just you never know. They could end up staying healthy. They could end up playing the full-time role like they're kind of locked into right now. But things change once Coulson kind of emerges as we expect. But for now, like I'm kind of fine with both of these guys just as late flyers that could be volume based productive. So I'd be fine with these guys later in drafts, but not spending up really to get anybody in this Chargers group.
Yeah, I think the thing that sticks out to me though, and I think what is very important though, is the orange number right there for Perriman and his coverage grade. He's never been traditionally good in coverage, and if you're going to get burned if you're going to get burned and give up chunk plays and give up that chunk yardage, then that's going to be no bueno. I don't the PFF grades aren't a be all end all, but what I do like them for, they don't indicate production, but it helps identify those fringe players or those non-elite players that when you see the grades, it's like, okay, maybe it's the time to maybe cut bait on these guys before snaps start being decreased, and it gets you behind on the 8 ball. So you're stuck with a guy who's now really not playing. So it kind of gives you a good indicator of potential loss of snaps or loss of volume.
Yeah. Oh, I think that's fair. All right, let's do another team here in the AFC West, the Las Vegas Raiders. So we got Robert Spillane, we got Divine Diablo. Anybody that you're particularly interested in this Vegas linebacker core?
I mean, I like both. I've always been a Diablo guy, even though Spillane has the true full-time role in the dot, but Diablo's has been productive. But I think it really is simple. I think it's you target. I'll be honest. I think you target Spillane first, and then you target Diablo. But Diablo has had a pretty good camp. I think he's a little slimmer, so he's playing faster. But I think it's pretty simple. Spillane and Diablo are your full-time guys.
Yeah. Spillane, he was a nice IDP last year. Like it was his first time as like a full-time player. We saw flashes of him in Pittsburgh, but not for an entire season. He barely missed a snap last season. Like he wasn't overly
he was 98, 99%.
Yeah. Like he landed 140 tackles on 1,100 snaps. So nothing crazy from him, but we'll see, how much Diablo plays this year. He wasn't like a full-time player last season across 14 games, but that LB2 role, it was about a 77% weekly snap share. So if you're saying, he's looking better, I think more experience too could potentially change that. And again, having Antonio Pierce as, the head coach for the full season, now we could see some changes from what they were last year under Josh McDaniels. So
and I think, sorry.
No, that's okay. Go ahead.
Yeah, I think, and then with the Raiders, I think they were one of the top. I think they're one of the top teams. We talk about man and zone. They're in that. They look to be in kind of that nice green spot where they're at about 75% expected zone coverage. So yeah, I think that's a good sign for both linebackers.
Yeah, that could definitely help. All right, let's go to the AFC East now, and right away we'll start with some news here with Matt Milano. Unfortunately, suffering a bicep injury. He's going to be out for a while. Like they're saying, like they're hoping he's back for December. I imagine they hold him off until the playoffs kind of thing. So another year gone for Matt Milano, it feels like. So we're talking about Terrell Bernard right now. Outside of that, like I expect Bernard to play full-time snaps.
Yes.
But what we saw last year when Matt Milano went down from the Bills, like I wouldn't be surprised if Bernard is the only full-time linebacker, I guess, because Dorian Williams played last year. Tyrell Dodson played last year, but these guys didn't play full-time roles. I think I tweeted it out. Yeah, I did tweet it out earlier today, but there was only 2 instances of the second linebacker playing more than 85% of snaps in a week with Matt Milano gone, and that was including the playoffs. And one of those games was Terrell Bernard had left with like a concussion or to be evaluated for a concussion. Otherwise, it was like 64% snap roll. And that's where my concern comes in with the second linebacker now that isn't Milano, because it might not be a full-time role. They have startable safeties, I would say,
Mhm.
on that roster that could play more. And we saw them do that last year. Taylor Rapp figures to play maybe more in the box. We got Mike Edwards. We got Kareem Jackson, Cole Bishop, who they drafted pretty highly. I think all these guys can see some playing time to kind of help supplement the loss of Matt Milano at linebacker. And it makes sense. It's when NFL teams are trying to do more anyways, is try to get more defensive backs on the field in certain situations, especially passing down. So,
Yep.
yeah, this is it's a bummer for Milano. Obviously, we hate to see it. We like him as a player, but again, just another year gone now with injury. So, how are you kind of viewing this Buffalo group now that Milano is basically toast for the season?
Yeah, I mean, obviously he's undraftable.
Yeah,
I wrote up. So I mean, right now, I mean, Bernard is the only target. I mean, he's got the 3-down roll, wearing the dot. We know that now. It's not a situation like last year where they were rotating the dot between Bernard and Dorian and Balin Spector and Milano, and just it's not as messy. So Bernard is your main target. When I saw that Milano was out, it's like, oh, pick up Dorian, and then I was like, you know what, I gotta just kind of take a measured, reasonable take here. So I wrote up a quick blurb on my 3-down article. It's basically Bernard's your target.
hmm
If you miss out on picking up Dorian Williams, I'm not losing sleep over it,
yeah,
honestly. They still have Nicholas Morrow, who's kind of that Sam linebacker, that left side linebacker. But again, it's mainly a 2 linebacker system, so he might still be the one that's coming off the field in those dimes, those 2 linebacker packages. Deion Jones is there, but I think he's more again of a backup to Bernard and even Balin Spector at this point. So, like you said, I think I'm expecting kind of that rotation, almost probably between Dorian Williams and probably Nicholas Morrow.
hmm
I don't know. Obviously, I don't know who's gonna come out on top. I mean, Terrell Dodson played more than 70. It took until week 9 for Dodson to at least play more than 70% of the snaps in multiple games. And he's gone. He actually had a very good PFF grade, was really solid in coverage, and it was actually a solid linebacker.
yeah.
But at this point, with you, like you said, they've got Taylor Rapp, they've got Cole Bishop, they've got some safeties. So I'm just kind of, Dorian and Morrow, maybe late round flyers if you're feeling desperate.
hmm
But if you, like I said, if you miss out on Dorian Williams or any of these guys, I'm not losing sleep. And even if you're in a dynasty league and you have Dorian Williams, I think your sell high window is open. So maybe if you can get a 3rd round pick for Dorian Williams, maybe a 4th, I might take it at this point. So
Yeah.
I think you just draft Terrell Bernard and just let your league mates fight over the LB2s and not worry about it.
Yeah. Yep. I think that's a good way to do it. I mean, it's not to say that Dorian Williams can't be a full-time player. It's just
No.
looking at reading the tea leaves and what this team has done in the past and the personnel that they currently have. It feels unlikely. But if he is, then he'll
Yeah.
be a week 1 waiver wire target, right? Like
Yep,
there's
exactly.
ways to get him. So
Exactly. And you know what? And it was nice whenever a player goes down in injury, you're always, oh, this guy's going to step up. Well, it sounds like Dorian actually had a pretty
yeah.
good day at camp today, made some plays. So it's good to at least see someone trying to put a stamp and putting his name on a position. So he did have a pretty good day at camp today.
Yeah. Yep. And yeah, obviously with Terrell Bernard, we still like quite a bit here. Potential top 12, top 15 type linebacker here. And then on the Jets, oh, there's Matt Milano. All right.
Rest in peace.
Yeah. They're on the Jets. I mean, not a ton to go into here,
No,
Mike. Honestly,
no.
like we can kind of whip through it. Like CJ Mosley, Quincy Williams. I have
That's it.
CJ Mosley is LB11. I got Quincy as LB21. They're 2 full-time guys. You'll love to see that. Nothing overly interesting here.
No, I mean, I think they're one of those. I mean, when you look at their defense, when they're a 64-30 zone man split, but they still are highly productive linebackers. So I think you can target, CJ Mosley is the grizzled veteran. He's your safe play, but Quincy Williams does, rarely misses a snap, and you can pretty much pencil in for 130, 135 tackles as well. So it's pretty much Mosley, Quincy Williams, move on.
Yep. Like both those guys. The other team here in the AFC East is the Miami Dolphins. So Mike, what's your read on it? Because I mean, it seems like David Long's going to be the guy that's wearing the green dot. Is
Yep.
that still the case here?
That's what I'm saying. Yep. That's what I'm saying. Yep.
Okay. So yeah, so David Long is definitely probably the guy I'd want to target. I mean, Jordan Brooks is definitely somebody that we could be looking at. We're not really sure what Anthony Weaver is going to be doing here as the new defensive coordinator taking over for Fangio. Like, we're hoping for 2 full-time guys, but it's not a guarantee, right? We definitely didn't get that from them last year under Vic Fangio. So it's kind of still TBD here. So I guess the main thing would be, we're safe drafting David Long, Jordan Brooks. We kind of have to temper expectations of what he can be this year, especially if we're not assuming a full-time role, which is definitely possible. So just be careful where you maybe draft Brooks, I guess.
Yeah, I think Brooks, you assume his free agent capital is going to keep him on the field. But I think with Weaver coming over from Baltimore, they utilized they were part of that they utilized that 2 linebacker system. So you think that's probably what they're going to do, but you just don't know. But yeah, Long is the guy that I'm targeting. What's funny is, if I were to ask you how many snaps David Long had last year, I think you'd probably say maybe 600 or 700. He still played over 823 snaps. He does sometimes get dinged up, but when he's on the field, he is productive. I think he does get that 12 to 13% tackle rate that kind of puts him into that LB2, LB3 range.
Yeah, I think that's that's definitely a fair ranking for him. So, and then, other than that, I mean, they've got the Patriots on here as well. New England. So they're playing actually tonight in the preseason here against Philadelphia, but Juwan Bentley has not been playing. Not sure what's going on there with Juwan Bentley, but I mean, he feels like the top target here, but again, we don't really have an idea exactly what Jerod Mayo is going to do. He is a Belichick disciple after all, so I wouldn't be surprised if we see some similar tendencies there where we only get 1 full-time linebacker, which I'd assume is Juwan Bentley, and then kind of a rotation for everyone else. So, just looking at the snaps tonight, I mean, it does look like it was Jelani Tavai and Raekwon McMillan that got the start again, but McMillan came off the field for at least 1 snap here. It looks like it was probably a third. It looks like it was a third down here for Jalen McMillan or Raekwon McMillan that he came off the field 3rd and 6. So again, Jerod Mayo potentially showing us a tendency here in the preseason. We'll see how much of it transfers over to the regular season, but I would imagine that Juwan Bentley's probably the only safe target here in New England. How are you feeling about them?
Yeah, Tavai is probably that an LB3, LB4. I mean, he still had 110 tackles and played 108 and played 837 snaps. So pretty good snap volume right there. So yeah, I mean, you assume Mayo's going to keep kind of those defensive principles, that same kind of snap share for his LB1s, LB2. So, but yeah, I think even still, I mean, Bentley, even in tackle heavy, I think he finishes the LB36. So he has a very uneven solo to assist ratio. So he's not exciting. He has an okay floor, but doesn't really provide too much of a ceiling from a tackle standpoint. So again, it's a full-time guy. If you can get him as a 3rd or 4th, you'll take it in those mid to late rounds, but just don't expect, doesn't have very high of a ceiling, I don't think.
Yeah, probably outside of sack heavy leagues too, because he does rush the passer a lot. So he has some sack upside, but again, it just kills his tackle efficiency. So, all right, let's go to the AFC South now, where we'll start with the Houston Texans. Azeez Al-Shaair. There's an injured Christian Harris right now. Henry To'o, I think, is also banged up, from what I believe. So, how are you? I guess we'll start with you. What's your feeling here on this Texans linebacker core?
Honestly, it's just Azeez Al-Shaair. Houston playing a very zone-friendly defense, zone-heavy, zone-friendly defense. We saw it last year. I mean, Blake Cashman, when he was on, had really good tackle numbers. So I think with Aziz coming in, he's got a familiarity with D'Amico Ryans already. So he's really my only target. I don't like the injury to Harris. So yeah, I mean, pretty simple for me. It's Al-Shair. He's wearing the dot, and I'm kind of moving on. I mean, huge tackle numbers with Tennessee last year, and again with that with that expected tackle rate within a zone around 14%, maybe 14.5%.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, Aziz is still one of those LB1s, top 12 type of a player.
Yeah, I love the potential for him in that defense. I'm with you. I think I have him as LB7 right now. Last year finished as LB13. Like he's got, I think, an even better ceiling this year in that defense in Houston. We'll see what happens with the second role. Like I think there is potential for like a second full-time guy.
Yep.
They just need to get healthy, right? Like it feels like it'll be Christian Harris if he can get healthy in time for the season. If not, then Hanky Two Toes there will be the next guy up. But again, he's also banged up. So just a situation to monitor, I guess, for that LB2 role, because there could be full-time snaps there, and it could be had at a decent value in most drafts.
Yep, agreed.
The Indianapolis Colts, we will go on to them next. Zaire Franklin, we're all very well aware now of who he is. Came out of kind of nowhere a couple seasons ago when Shaq Leonard was banged up and immediately became an IDP darling. He finished as LB3 last year. I think I have him as LB3 again this year. But he did get joined by a new friend in EJ Speed. So the Colts were a team. They were the most zone-heavy team in the league last season. So you love that. They also played 2 full-time roles. You love that even more. So, EJ Speed, he did have a stretch there where he actually outperformed Franklin, like as a tackler. It was just a small sample. It was like 4 games or something near the end of the season, but everybody kind of noticed it and maybe got excited about him. But on the year, on a per snap basis, that Zaire Franklin was one of the most effective tacklers of the season. He was 93rd percentile in tackles versus expected. Speed was right around expected for his position on the entire year, but that stretch at the end of the season obviously was really nice for him. So obviously we love Zaire Franklin. How are you feeling about EJ Speed heading into 2024?
Yeah, I've got Speed projected for that close to full-time role. Zaire had a 60.4% tackle rate on over 1,000 snaps. Speed it's about 14% on over 700 snaps.
That's nice.
And again, with with Indy playing that a zone heavy, I've got Zaire right around 165 tackles. I think I even have Speed at right in that 130 to 135. So at cost, obviously I think Speed could return a better value at cost, but I mean, I think Zaire and EJ Speed are one of those few linebacker duos that you could draft both of them, have both on your team, start them weekly, and I think you'd be in good shape.
Yep. Makes sense. I mean, honestly, I kind of feel the same about the next team here. Foye Oluokun, Devin Lloyd of the Jacksonville Jaguars. What do you think? I mean, we got 2 full-time roles here again. Feeling pretty comfortable about rolling with these guys as your starters on a weekly basis.
Yep, I think so. Lloyd's bulked up a little bit, so he feels pretty good about his role. And I think this is one of those roles where or one of these defenses where you don't listen to the weak side Mike, because they're saying Devin Lloyd came up and said, "Hey, I'm playing the Mike position." And at that point, everybody's like, "Oh, he's calling the plays." I'm like, no, it's just terminology. And that kind of is where you're not paying attention, where I don't think you want to pay attention to that Mike weak side anymore. So, Fasade is going to call the plays. He wore the dot last week. They, starters got a few snaps. Foy wore the dot. But again, Foy, he's just been an elite tackler.
He's unbelievable
since coming over. I mean, even during his last season in Atlanta, and then that first season with Jacksonville, he's just been an elite tackler. So, and I think Lloyd is good. I think Lloyd's in a good spot to be a breakout. I think he was definitely in the 100 tackle range. Might have been in that 115, 120. I think I do have him in that 125, 130 range. These are good tacklers. What's good, they don't really have much in front of them, so their defensive line doesn't really plug much gaps, so they're free to make tackles. So they're pretty solid tacklers. So I don't mind
Yeah.
having either one of them.
Yeah, I definitely don't mind. I mean, I have Foye ranked as LB1, but like in our scoring, like the guy has finished as LB1 in 3 straight seasons
Yeah,
for IDP. Like that's
right.
insane. Like
That is unheard of.
yeah, like I again, I have him ranked as LB1 because he makes the most sense given kind of like my ranking criteria that I have, but actually finishing as LB1 for the 4th straight time is a hard ask. But I mean, I'm not going to argue with anybody that takes him as LB1. That's where I have him ranked as well. But I'm with you. I think Devin Lloyd isn't just as good of a spot. He's not the elite tackler that Foye is, but he's playing the same snaps in the same defense. I like his potential there, and definitely somebody that could be had at a decent value.
Yep. Yep.
Last team in the AFC South is the Tennessee Titans. So we got Kenneth Murray coming in from free agency, potentially going to be now the green dot in Tennessee here, taking over for Azeez Al-Shaair. We got Jack Gibbons, we got Cedric Gray. So how do you feel about this Tennessee Titans linebacker core with Kenneth Murray as the LB1 this season?
That's where it's leaning. So
Yeah.
it is looking like Kenneth Murray. Cedric Gray was drafted, and again, kind of the green dot talk to Gray started, and I don't think a rookie linebacker is getting a green dot anytime soon. I don't think anymore. I just think that's just I'm not expecting that anymore. But yeah, with Murray, I think last week it was him and Gibbons. If I'm not mistaken, I think both of them, it was a 2 linebacker defense for the starter snaps. So Gibbons looks to have a full-time role, which I actually like. I mean, Gibbons is a pretty solid player. And if you're comparing the costs and when you're looking at actual tackles and expected tackles, I am not expecting Kenneth Murray to produce like Azeez Al-Shaair. That's just really hasn't been his game. And honestly, I like Murray in his role. I mean, it's a full-time role. I think this might be a case where I'd almost rather take the discount on Jack Gibbons over Kenneth Murray, even though I know Murray is probably going to be that 3 down green dot wear. So I think I have Murray projected at about 120, 124 tackles, but I am not expecting a 160 tackle outburst like Azeez Al-Shaair did last year. And you know what? If Murray explodes for that, good for him. Good on you. I tip my hat, but yeah, I'm not expecting it. But yeah, no, I think you haven't really heard much of Cedric Gray out of camp.
No,
really. So I think it's going to be a mostly a 2 linebacker system in Tennessee. And, when you look at that expected and actual, obviously Gibbons a little lower, but I think he has a pretty solid tackle efficiency. So, that's kind of how I'm approaching it. I'm kind of taking a discount and hoping Jack Gibbons is the more, kind of that more productive linebacker or produces the same at a lower cost.
That's what you got to hope, right? Like, I think, Kenneth Murray's never been that elite tackler. He was up there on the screen there for a bit, like just looking at his tackle versus expected numbers, constantly below. Last year, minus 26 tackles below expected, so 2nd percentile. Jack Gibbons was at least around expected for his role. So preseason, like you said, it gave us a kind of our first look at what Denard Wilson might do for his defense. Like, again, it was a preseason, so maybe we don't put like a ton of stock into it. But it's because it's not uncommon for teams to utilize most of their base personnel. But just as like our first kind of hint of what it could look like we did at least see Murray and Gibbons both play 100% of snaps. So if that continues, I wouldn't be surprised if I'm ranking Gibbons ahead of Murray in weekly rankings, just because Murray has been another one of those, again, inefficient tacklers. And, I think Gibbons has just as good a shot to outproduce him if they're both playing the same amount of snaps. But for now, for safety, we're drafting Kenneth Murray over Jack Gibbons right now, just because of the safety of that green dot and potential full-time role. But I don't have him like too high. He's like LB 38 for me. Gibbons, yeah. So
in my 3 down, I wrote, I've got him kind of in that 3rd to 4th tier.
Yeah.
If I were to come, like I have him in that same tier, like Me and I think I even have these guys maybe right around the same tier, maybe even a little higher. But like if I'm looking at EJ Speed, Jack Campbell, and Devin Lloyd, I'm taking those guys above Kenneth Murray.
Yeah.
I mean, Kenneth Murray last year, 968 snaps, had an 11.1% tackle rate.
Yeah.
That's kind of not great when you have a full-time guy at around 11%. That's not a good number. Jack Gibbons with a 628 snaps had a 15.1% tackle rate. So when the snaps go up, the tackle efficiency goes down, but I would still expect if Jack Gibbons does have a full-time role, I'd expect him probably right around that 13 to 14% rate, which I still think is definitely kind of that LB2, LB3 range, which I'm more than comfortable with.
Yeah, and at least he's not going to likely be inefficient like a Kenneth Murray, right? So that's the main thing that we're hoping there. All right, let's go to the NFC now. What are we? Well, we're a little bit over an hour, so we're on pace for like 2 hours. Let's see. We'll see if we could get it under 2 hours. It'll be close, but let's go to the NFC.
We spent 20 minutes on the Browns.
That's true. Yeah, the Browns definitely stunk us. So let's see. I mean, this next team we don't have to spend much time on at all. It's Chicago Bears. It's Tremaine Edmonds and TJ Edwards. I mean, TJ Edwards obviously is somebody that again performed really well last year. I think he finished as LB4. Somebody that I love. I'm going to continue to draft if I can. TJ Edwards also in a full-time role, so it's hard to argue with the snaps, but just if I'm choosing between the two, TJ Edwards, just based on what he's done over the past 3 years when he's been on the field, like consistently performing above expected and delivering some tackle efficiency, where Tremaine Edmonds not as much. So we still like the snaps for Tremaine Edmonds, so that'll help. But yeah, it's just two full-time linebackers, and TJ Edwards LB6 for me, Tremaine Edmonds LB22.
Yeah. The one thing, though, that was interesting to note is that last week Edmonds was wearing the dot over Edwards when Edwards had it all pretty much the entire season. So is that going to carry over to this week or to the season? I don't know. But even with Edmonds getting the dot, I'm still taking Edwards every time over Edmonds.
Yeah, I think they'll both play full-time anyways, but yeah, we'll see how that kind of shakes out here. But let's go to the Green Bay Packers next, Mike. Quay Walker, we feel pretty good about starting here. I mean, they did draft Edgerrin Cooper in the second round. He was the first linebacker off the board, but it doesn't look like Edgerrin Cooper is going to start the season, which we had talked about way back at the draft. When I did the rookie linebackers episode with Kyle, we talked a lot about Isaiah McDuffie in that episode. And Isaiah McDuffie has kind of played himself into a starting role. Edgerrin Cooper was a little bit banged up as well. So I'm treating them as Quay Walker first and Isaiah McDuffie second, and not looking to add Edgerrin Cooper in drafts right now.
Yeah, completely agree. McDuffie is not willingly giving up his role. So again, I kind of go back. I'm like, all right, I got to dial things back when it comes to these rookie linebackers and these landing spots, unless a rookie linebacker gets drafted into a team that it just has a dearth of linebackers, that just is a linebacker hellscape.
Right.
These rookie linebackers, I don't think aren't going to get a full-time role for at least the first year. So I think when you're doing your rookie drafts, I think you really need to temper your expectations and expect, okay, these linebackers are probably not going to see the field probably for at least a year. They're probably not going to be contributing to my team, for the first year. And so I really need to dial that back for redraft, because I've lowered my projections on, like I said, I lowered on Colson, lowered them on Cooper. McDuffie looks to be the LB2. Still about a 70. I would say probably that's still probably going to be a 75, maybe 80% snap rate. It'll be interesting to see what Halfland does with the defense, but McDuffie's not going away. So he's really locking into that LB2 role.
Yep. And again, another nice value to have in drafts. Like you said, is probably not a full-time role, so you don't have to spend up too highly to get him, but somebody that, if you're in those deeper leagues, he would be the guy that I'd be kind of looking towards to adding at the end of drafts. So other than Green Bay, we also have the Minnesota Vikings. So I just want to say how offended I am that my guy, Ivan Pace, would flat out lie to Kay Adams and me, all of us, I guess, but mostly me, that he'd be wearing the green dot and calling the defense this year. giving me like a ton of hope, Mike, that he'd be a 100% linebacker this year. We saw in the preseason that this was not the case. Cashman is wearing the dot. You've been tracking this for a long time. How often do you see them switch that among the same personnel in the preseason?
Well, we'll see what happens. Well, I mean, I will say Pace was on 13 out of the 14 snaps for that first series. He came off on, I think, a goal line. It was a goal line. It was a goal line defense. It was a 3rd and goal. So he did play 13 out of the 14 snaps and was more productive than Cashman. So I'm holding out on hope to that. What I'm hoping is, well, one, Cashman's also already hurt. He hurt his finger and needed surgery. So he's out until the stitches heal or get removed. So Cashman also has not been a pinnacle of health either. Whenever he's had a full-time role, it just seems like he gets dinged up. But when you look at Pace, even though he's undersized, he's a good football. You just see a football player.
Yeah.
But yes, I immediately, when he came on, said, "Yep, I'm wearing the dot." I'm like, "All right." And then you're like, "What the gravy? Why is Cashman wearing the dot now?" And you look like a fool. It's like Ivan Pace has made us all look like fools, and I'm not happy with it. Yeah. Although seeing him in that all Vikings white uniform just was.
Oh, he's so good. Yeah, so swaggy.
It was uniform.
Number 0 too. Like
uniform porn. Yeah,
but
I'm still drafting Pace out of Cashman, but I'm not, it's something I'm noting. I'm not panicking. Another way I'm looking at it is spring, like with Major League Baseball and spring training, they're trying different things. They're testing other things, trying things out, seeing how things work. So that's also another way that I'm approaching it, but definitely it's eye-opening. I will definitely not say that it's not anything to worry about. I'm not panicking, but it's definitely caused you to raise the eyebrow like The Rock.
Yeah, and it's definitely a concern, right? Because, if we look at this team last year under Brian Flores, they were the worst weekly snap rate for the LB2. It was 43.5%, like just not usable for IDP. And look, the preseason usage, like you said, it wasn't to that extreme. It still does kind of have me worried. Like we saw every other linebacker grouping as well have their secondary linebacker come off the field at some point in the game. I think the other thing worth noting too, like with those starters, Ivan Pace playing 13 of 14 snaps. Harrison Smith didn't play either, right? So it was only Cameron Bynum and Josh Metellus as the starters. And another thing we know about Flores' defense last year is that he loved having all 3 of his starting safeties on the field at once. Bynum, Metellus, and Harrison Smith all played over 1,000 snaps last year. So hopefully they don't do that again. But again, it's all the same personnel. It's the same defensive coordinator. That's the part that worries me for Ivan Pace. So I am gonna, wait till preseason week 2. I know it was like a finger thing for Cashman, so we don't know.
Yeah, unfortunately, I don't think week 2 is. I think if I don't think week 2 may tell us anything either if Cashman doesn't play. Yeah. So we may not really find out anything definitive maybe till that 3rd preseason game.
Yeah. So this was a case where, I had moved Pace right up my rankings. I had him at like LB 13. I was ready to, fully embrace the full-time role, and now I got to push him down. And I probably will be drafting Cashman ahead of him. Again, like you said, the health and stuff is going to matter, but it's just, again, we got to follow the snaps, and I'm really worried about the snaps for Ivan Pace right now. So hopefully it gets better. But
if he does if you do find that he is falling and you get him as an LB3 or LB4, I don't have a problem with that at all. But we had our big Kings Classic draft, this IDP draft, and I drafted him as my LB1. And this is before I saw the dot. And I'm like,
damn,
you got to be kidding me. No, I drafted my LB2. No, I got Ernest Jones as my LB1. But I did go Pace as my LB2, and that was before realizing that Cashman wore the dot. And I'm just like, what are you doing to me?
Yeah, it definitely was a gut punch.
It was.
Yeah, we'll have to see kind of how the season shakes.
And you know what? And you can't. It's also one of those situations where it's like, dude, you told me Pace was going to wear the dot. And I'm like, This
told
wasn't
us.
an interpretation
Yeah.
of a training camp report. He was on the NFL Network saying, "I am wearing the dot. I am calling the plays." This was sourced by him.
Yeah.
You yell at him, don't come at me.
Yeah, that's kind of the way you got to look at it, right? Because that information only came from him. So let's look
you
at
come at him, not me.
Yeah, exactly. Let's look at another linebacker situation where, okay, the Detroit Lions, after the Ivan Pace disappointment, I can't handle another lie. If Jack Campbell isn't actually wearing the dot, I might snap, because that's kind of been the talk around camp,
Yes.
right? Like you've been tracking this as well, and it does feel like this year Jack Campbell potentially going to be a full-time role. We did not see that last year from him. It was the Prince of Asgard himself that stole that from us, but he's still there. How are you feeling? What's your confidence level, I guess, in Jack Campbell as a full-time player this year?
Well, I tell you, I will say the confidence level did get shot with Ivan Pace, I will say.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, Colton Pouncy seems to be a pretty reliable. I mean, he's been there, the athletic writer, he's been there. Yeah. Saying Campbell's is the green dot guy. He's the Mike guy, green dot guy. He's really taken he's really taken on a leadership. He's vocal, really stepping into the second year. So, I mean, I would say my confidence is probably at about 65-35.
Fair.
But I've drafted Campbell ahead of Anzalone.
Mm-hmm.
But he, like you said, he's still there.
Yeah, he's always there, this guy. He doesn't go away. But yeah, last year it was, like I said, 100% Anzalone. It was about 70% for the LB2 there. So if this isn't a case where, both guys are going to play full time, which I think is definitely possible as well, right? Like it's definitely something, we know that they like Anzalone, and if they like Jack Campbell just enough to give him the green dot, like maybe both of these guys play full-time snaps and we can get some better usage out of the Detroit linebackers. But last year, and the year before that, Anzalone just constantly kind of being a thorn in the side of IDP managers, and he was fine last year. He didn't really do anything special. He just happened to be healthy for over 1,000 snaps, but he was another guy. He's never been overly effective tackler. You look at his numbers there on the screen, always below expected in tackle production. So we would definitely prefer Jack Campbell to be a full-time player, but again, it's not a guarantee. We want to see, hopefully in the preseason, at some point that they give us a better clue. But for now, I kind of have them ranked right beside each other. Just to, again, I'm hedging with this bet until I do my updates in the ranks and I could actually see what they're doing on the field.
Yeah, I mean that's fair, but like I said, like you said, I have them right, kind of grouped in the kind of that same tier. But yeah, even last year started the should we temper expectation? Yeah, I think last year is what really started the whole let's temper expectations on rookies, because I mean, first round pick Jack Campbell, tackle machine out of Iowa, you're thinking, dude's gonna hit, he's better than Alex Anzalone. He's got to see the field on a full-time role. He's got to play, first rounder.
Yep.
I think he was at about a 60% snap rate, if I'm not mistaken. I mean, Anzalone played 1,000 snaps. Campbell about 640. So Campbell had the higher tackle efficiency, but Anzalone just seems to be that thorn in your side.
That's what he does. He's always there. So we'll have to see. Hopefully, again, the preseason gives us a better idea, but we'll definitely be keeping an eye on it either way. So let's go to the NFC West now. Arizona Cardinals. This is a group that, it's basically led by Kaiser White. So he's going to be the lone full-time player. He's back healthy now. We saw him last year. He was really productive in that role. It was again another one of those zone heavy defenses. So I do like that about, again, Kaiser White's potential. Again, being basically the only linebacker on the field is really going to help. Like I have him as LB14 right now. He was actually surprisingly right on that in points per game last year. Now that I'm looking at it, he was LB14. So the other option, again, is basically just for deeper leagues, and it's Mac Wilson. I don't think he's going to be a full-time player. So Yeah. You're deeper leagues interested in Mac Wilson?
Yep, I am. I mean, he's actually had a pretty good camp. Wilson actually pretty good in coverage. I mean, you see it right there, that dark green. He had an 86.9 coverage grade, so pretty solid in coverage.
Yeah.
But yeah, White was on pace for 140 tackles, had 9 tackles for loss. And the Cardinals were mostly a nickel 2 linebacker system. I mean, White played had a 12.7% tackle rate, but like I said, was on pace for about 140 tackles. Yeah, Wilson, late round potential full-time guy to target that you could pretty much get for free. I don't think there's too much hype surrounding Mac Wilson, so I think he's one of those guys you can kind of get for free. If he turns out, you're kind of hoping maybe he doesn't play in the preseason. That way his ADP doesn't skyrocket if he does turn into preseason. But yeah, I mean, it's Kazir White and then Wilson much later. But yeah, White's on is my guy.
Nice. Yep. Same here. And kind of feeling the same about this next team as well. The Los Angeles Rams, they're another one of those 1 linebacker teams, right? Where Ernest Jones, very clear IDP target. I have him as LB5. He was a top 12 guy last year. It was LB7 in points per game. Like, I don't really care about the Rams LB2, like whether it's Troy Reeder or Jake Hummel or Christian Roseboom or whoever. Like, this was a group that last year played around 50% of snaps in that LB2 role. I don't think that any of these guys is going to really exceed that. Like, deep leagues, if you want to take a shot on them, if we could figure out who that LB2 is going to be here in the preseason, but the Rams don't play their starters in the preseason. So that makes it pretty hard for us to figure out who it's going to be. So just got to kind of search and pay attention to who's playing with the ones. But I think this is a situation where we're going to get a lot of Cam Curl in the box playing that second linebacker role, which we love for him, but not as excited for the LB2 here. But love Ernest, obviously. He's excellent.
Yeah, I mean, Rams were dime single linebacker 46% of the time. So that's definitely no bueno for that LB2. My only concern is that knee that Ernest Jones. I think he's returned to practice, so which definitely makes me – it definitely puts me at ease, but still a little concerned. I think your LB backup handcuff is probably going to be Jake Hummel, because I think Hummel wore the dot with that second team starting defense in week 1 of the preseason. So Hummel looks to be that next man up if you're in a deeper league and everybody is so linebacker thirsty that when someone gets hurt, who's the next guy up? It's immediately, you got to get that next guy. So that's the only reason why I'm even, why Hummel would even be on my radar. But other than that, it's Jones. I'm moving on, not even thinking about the LB2.
Yep. Makes sense to me. So somewhere that we do probably have to think about the LB2 quite a bit, actually, because it could be a mix at some point. But at least heading into the season, I mean, Fred Warner for the San Francisco 49ers, very clear LB1 for them. Whether you have him ranked inside that range or not is up to you. He's probably on the fringes for most people. Most people are going to be pretty excited about Fred Warner. He had a strong year last year, but again, he does about what is expected of him as a tackler. And that obviously has the big plays as well. Again, just something to kind of temper with those big plays about them repeating every year. But the LB2 is probably the most interesting conversation here, because it does look like Devondre Campbell is going to be a starter to start the year, because Dre Greenlaw tore his Achilles in the Super Bowl, which was brutal. But yeah, I mean, like, Devondre Campbell, he's not high in my draft rankings. I don't know where you have him, because we don't know when Dre Greenlaw is going to be back, and we don't know how much of a role he's going to play type thing. But Devondre Campbell, like, he's definitely somebody that in season on a weekly basis, as long as Greenlaw's out, like, Campbell's probably going to be ranked pretty high, right?
Yeah, I can agree with that. I mean, from a total snap perspective, I mean, I've got Campbell at about 620, 624, right in that 600 range for snaps. Greenlaw, I just don't know when he's going to come back. There's no way. I'm not expecting him for probably the first, 2/3 of the season. At least I've got him at about 275 snaps. Yeah. I've got him at about 275. So as an overall snap rate, I've got him at about 60% of the total snaps, but you're probably able to get Campbell pretty late. And like you said, from a weekly standpoint, the 49ers are a 2 linebacker system, and they're pretty much they're kind of that top 10, right outside top 10 for zone. So the LB2, I mean, you saw Dre Greenlaw was a productive linebacker in that defense. So like you said, they're going to be good. Campbell's going to be good on a weekly basis. So Campbell is draftable. I'm not obviously not drafting Greenlaw, but yes, Campbell is definitely draftable.
Yeah, I'm with you. I mean, you could get him at a pretty good discount here because we don't know when Dre Greenlaw is going to be back. I'm with you. Like, it could be late November. Like, there's kind of two like outcomes, I guess, here where Greenlaw like either comes back and slowly eats into Campbell's snaps, or if it's later in the year, which we expect, and they want to save Dre Greenlaw more for the playoffs, maybe they only play him in base personnel, like he plays that old Aziz Al-Shaair role, right?
Yep.
But really, again, Campbell, I think, a safe bet for weekly snaps as long as Greenlaw's out, and until we know more. But I think I have him as LB 48 right now. I could probably move him up, but he's definitely going to be higher than that in my weekly rankings.
Yeah, for sure. Yep, I agree there totally.
All right, and then the last team in the NFC West is the Seattle Seahawks. So new linebackers in Seattle, new coaching staff, new defensive coordinator. One of the top linebackers there is Jerome Baker, who's banged up right now. Tyrell Dodson is also in the mix there. So how are you kind of, I guess, projecting these Seattle linebackers at the moment? Because we know Jerome Baker's never been the most efficient tackler, but it's a new defense, so it could change.
I'm actually prioritized. I have not Knight. I do like Tyrese Knight, but I do have Tyrell Dodson prioritized higher than Baker. I do think, again, he said he's, that Bobby Wagner heir apparent that he's going to call the plays, but now do you trust? I mean, are these players getting punished for like giving away too much? I don't know. It's like, if these players that are, I don't know, are you giving away a secret if you're telling people you're wearing the dot? I don't know. It's like, I don't know. It's like, but Dodson did wear the dot week 1. Baker, I have to see what his role is as an LB2, but again, Seattle is a very zone heavy defense. I mean, when you saw Wagner and Jordan Brooks's tackle production in that defense last year, you kind of have, you have good hopes, but Baker his tackle efficiency has been steadily on the decline. And could it be a defensive scheme? Could things open up a little bit more for him in Seattle? I don't know. I'm probably not willing to pay for it. I'm probably going to take Tyrell Dodson and probably move on. I think I have Tyrell Dodson projected as, with the most snaps. And like I said, I have him as the dot. I like Tyrese Knight. I mean, Jerome Baker already, again, nursing hamstring injuries. And again, when you're nursing these soft tissue injuries at the beginning of camp, when you're supposed to be healthy, that's a concern.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely. I mean, yeah, we'll see what happens when Jerome Baker's back. Like I have him slightly ahead of Dotson just based on, experience in the NFL, just kind of thinking how these coaching staffs might deploy these guys. But like you said, if Dotson's going to be wearing the dot, I feel pretty good about that because about Dodson over Baker comfortably, because we did maybe get like a little hint in preseason week 1 where Dodson worked as the lone 100% linebacker while Tyrese Knight left on like a 3rd and long. So Aiden Durd is the new defensive coordinator there. So maybe showing some tendency there in what he prefers, like, in obvious passing situations. So with Baker in the lineup, we'll see if that continues, but that could be something to kind of monitor there with this group.
Yep.
All right, let's move to the NFC East now, and we'll start with everybody's favorite Dallas Cowboys. There's Tyrell Dodson for the YouTube crowd.
I like the green there. Those cover, that
Those
coverage
nice,
grade, that PFF grade. So
yeah,
I think he's a pretty solid. Solid player. But
yeah, he had a nice season last year for sure. So
Dallas
is another new defense this year because, well, I mean, I say new, they're different than last year. Mike Zimmer is not a new defensive play caller, but he's coming in here to take over for Dan Quinn. Mike Zimmer's defense projected as the most linebacker friendly defense when I had put that together, just based on what we saw from him last time he was a defensive play caller, which was back in 2021 with Minnesota. He did have Eric Kendricks at the time, so that's good to kind of reference, I guess. But it was also a 2 linebacker system at the time. So if that holds true, maybe, again, things can change. It's been a while too, but if that holds true, Damone Clark could be a really nice value. The problem is he's not fully healthy right now. He hasn't been practicing with, I think, a sore knee. DeMarvion Overshown is also currently out. So next man up is maybe like rookie Maris Lufau, which is kind of gross. I didn't like him coming out. So
did Overshown get hurt recently? Because he played in the preseason game. Did he
played in the preseason game? But yeah, I saw something that he was out of practice for one of the games, something like that. So I think it was after the preseason. So again, we'll see what happens. Hopefully these injuries aren't serious. We've seen teams be, cautious with these guys before the year actually starts. Yeah. So, but either way, like this Dallas defense in 2024 does figure to look much different than what they were in 2023 under Dan Quinn, where, it's a lot of the same personnel, but in how they'll be deployed, they should be much more IDP friendly for our linebackers at the very least, because Quinn was man heavy, he was blitz heavy, he was rotation heavy. We haven't seen that as much from Mike Zimmer. So we'll see if that tendency for Zimmer holds true. But I kind of like the Dallas linebackers a little bit more this year than I did going into last year. How about you?
Yeah, I'm definitely, Kendricks obviously has the familiarity with Zimmer. Probably locked into that 3-down role. We'll be wearing the dot. Yeah, the LB2, what was, I guess, a little bit of a concern for me with Zimmer's defense is that LB2 was Anthony Barr. He wasn't really known for tackling. He was a kind of a pass rushing linebacker for the most part from that strong side. So that is my only concern as far as the LB2 goes and the tackle production. Is he going to be used like an Anthony Barr, or is it just going to be 2 off-ball linebackers, right, left, and go see ball, go get ball? That's kind of how I'm projecting things, and that's kind of how I see Overshown. I have actually Overshown projected higher, and I have him projected as the LB2 alongside Kendricks over Clark. So I think Clark will probably be maybe more of the base. But again, I don't know. I'm kind of reading the tea leaves and how Zimmer likes to use his guys and what he looks for in a linebacker. I think Overshown kind of projects as that guy that Zimmer likes. So that's who I think is going to be the breakout LB2 of this defense.
Nice. Yeah, it's going to be, I think Overshown's definitely going to work in, like, either way, even if he's not the starter. I was talking to John Owning. He's our one of our editors here at PFF, and he's a big Cowboys fan. And he was down there at training camp, and he was saying that, yeah, LB2 right now looks like Damone Clark, but he was saying that Overshown is definitely working in there, and he's going to have a role this year. So we'll see how they kind of deploy these guys. There's still lots of time left here before the regular season. So lots of time to get sorted. But yeah, I think, Kendricks clearly the top guy. I think I'm as LB15 right now. So I like Kendricks quite a bit for this defense.
Yep.
All right, New York Giants, Bobby Okereke. This is potentially another one of those one linebacker defenses. Micah McFadden, most likely the LB2, but outside of deeper leagues, are you interested in the Giants LB2? Do you think Shane Bowen is going to do anything different? Because Shane Bowen kind of a similar defense from what he ran in Tennessee to what the Giants were last year.
Yeah, that's kind of what that was my concern. I think it was a 2 linebacker system, 67% of the snaps, 70% in 23. Could bring those same principles to the Giants. So, and you know what, that Deontay Johnson has actually looked pretty good. So he could play into a rotation. McFadden had a pretty quiet 100 tackle season for only playing about 60% of the snaps. Yeah. But I think there are snaps with the LB2. I think Simmons actually played more linebacker, if I'm not mistaken, in week 1 of the preseason. I think he had more box or linebacker snaps, if I'm not mistaken. So that kind of throws the monkey wrench, because I thought he was pretty much going to be slated for the slot corner role.
Yeah, so Simmons, he played more linebacker, but it wasn't with the starters. He
Okay.
played when he was with the starters, he only played in the slot and he played wide corner.
Okay.
And it was only on third down. Where once the starters left the game, like he kind of stayed in, and that's when he played linebacker with like a bunch of backups. So
Yeah.
I worry about Simmons. I think he's toast for IDP. I don't think there's going to be anything that we get
No,
from
I don't think
him.
so either.
Yeah.
Yeah, Simmons, I'm not thinking of him at all.
Yeah, no, he's definitely going to be an afterthought by the end of this year, I think. So, yeah, I think Bobby Okereke, obviously top 12 potential there, going to be a full time guy, and Micah McFadden for those deeper leagues. I think it's fair to expect Shane Bowen to come in with maybe of a more one linebacker type deployment, more man coverage and more man coverages, like similar what we saw with Wink Martindale as well. That's kind of what we got in Tennessee.
Yeah. I think McFadden is probably more maybe like a best ball target, because I think he's going to be one of those guys that'll just like he'll just be maddening on a weekly basis.
Yeah.
So I think he's more of a 4th or 5th linebacker for maybe bye weeks, maybe injuries. But yeah, I mean, it's pretty much Okereke. And I think Okereke was the only linebacker that played 100% of the snaps.
Yeah, he didn't miss a single snap last year, which is just crazy, 1,128 snaps. So it's going to be difficult to do that 2 years in a row, but you never know. All right, let's go to the Philadelphia Eagles.
There's a lot of red. Oh my God.
God, Devin White is just yeah. So the Philadelphia Eagles playing tonight. Again, same thing we saw in preseason week 1. Same thing we had been hearing about the past month is that Devin White, Zach Bond, those are the ones. It's not Nakobe Dean. It's not rookie Jeremiah Trotter Jr.
Nope.
Devin White, who they brought in from free agency on a 1-year deal, and Zach Bond, who has essentially barely ever played linebacker. He's played like less than 200 linebacker snaps in his NFL career, was mostly an edge. Those are going to be the starters for the Eagles linebacker core. We'll see if it works out for them. I don't have either of these guys ranked very highly just because we don't know what to expect from Bond. We kind of know what to expect from Devin White. It's a lot of inefficiency there and overhype, but you never know. There could be a rotation where these guys, maybe Nakobe Dean and Jeremiah Trotter do get more run throughout the season if these guys end up sucking. It's not a great unit here for Philadelphia. So how are you feeling about going into the season with Devin White, Zach Bond as a potential starter in your lineup?
Well, I mean, with Devin White, I mean, it's hard to ignore the 3-down roll with the dot. So that's hard to ignore. But I think I've said it. The green dot doesn't necessarily is not an indication of production, or there's no really correlation. I mean, when you look at it, the top linebackers are typically wearing the dot. I mean, that's, I don't think it's not a coincidence, but at the same time, a green dot doesn't correlate or result in production. And I think Devin White is probably one of those, one of those rules. I didn't rush out. I increased his projection slightly. I had him under 100 tackles. I gave him a little bit of a bump once I did realize that he was going to wear the dot. I gave him a little bit of a bump, but I'm not like overly like going out of my way to draft him. And I'm not going out of really my way to drafting Zach Bond either, because we haven't seen him as an off-ball linebacker, and his tackle rate, his tackle efficiency has not been, it's been about 9-10%. So is Bond going to kind of be an Andrew Van Ginkel or that Andrew Johnson type linebacker that Fangio had in Miami and Denver? Is he going to be more of a pass rushing type of a player? So I just don't know what to expect of him. If those are going to be the 2 linebackers, that's great. But if someone wants to draft Zach Bond over someone like EJ Speed or Caden Ellis or Jermaine Pratt or David Long, fine, I'll let him do that all day long. So, it could just be given one of those situations. Again, if someone drafts Devin White, I'm not losing sleep over it. If someone drafts Zach Bond and I don't get him, I'm not losing sleep over it.
Yeah. And I think for the most part, people are going to still draft Devin White relatively high just because has that name value. We've seen him have these, big sack years, right? But
Mhm.
never really the tackle years. And those are the things that are a little bit more sticky than the big plays, especially
Yep.
inefficient tackling, which is what Devin White has literally been since he's entered the league. Where, yeah, Zach Bond, I think most people are not even really aware of him as a potential IDP, where,
Mhm.
he can be a nice discount near the end of drafts, and he'd be somebody that I'd scoop up. But I mean, we'll see what happens here. Nakobe Dean, it's not looking good for him right now. So
No, it really isn't.
looking at the preseason snaps, Devin White left the game after the first 2 drives. Zach Bond did stay in for the 3rd drive and played
Mhm.
with Nakobe Dean, but then after that, Zach Bond was done, and Nakobe Dean and Jeremiah Trotter played. So again, just kind of looking at the depth chart here, it would be White, Bond, and then Dean, and then Trotter, but you're really looking at White and Bond, I think, potentially full-time roles here in Philadelphia, and then I mean, maybe full-time roles. We don't know.
Yeah.
Fangio didn't really do that last year for Miami either.
Yep.
So Bond could just be a part-time guy.
Exactly.
So there's make sure you're just not overpaying for these 2 linebackers.
Yeah, I think Devin White, that 2020 season is beginning to look like an outlier.
Yeah.
140 tackles, 9 sacks, and
right. Yeah, the 9 sacks.
15 tackles for loss. And since then, his tackles have gone steadily down. 11 and a half sacks in his last 3 years, and everything else has just kind of gone down to last year, where he just kind of hit rock bottom, career low in tackles, 83. So granted, missed 3 games, but he wasn't very efficient even up until that point. So
Yep, I'm with you. So tempering expectations for sure. And then the last team in the NFC East here is the Washington Commanders. Dan Quinn takes over here, but he's got Bobby Wagner, and he brought in Frankie Louvu as well. So I know last week or whatever, the preseason week 1 gave me probably more reason to temper expectations for Frankie Louvu. I don't know how you're feeling about him, but I feel like he's going to be probably one of the more overvalued IDPs this offseason. And just because, again, that usage in Washington or Dan Quinn's defense, he played 4 snaps, but 3 of those snaps he was blitzing, 2 of them were on the edge. Those are killers for potential tackle efficiency, right? Like, it gives him some big play upside, but on a weekly basis, we don't know when that's going to come. I don't think he should be. He was being drafted as a top 20 linebacker, using the IDP show ADP, and I got him as LB 36. I might move him even further down than that. How are you feeling?
I recently moved him down when I see being said that Louvu is going to be used as in the Micah Parsons role. That gives me pause, because that right there is going to limit his tackle floor. Definitely lowers that tackle floor if he's going to be playing mostly on the edge. Obviously, like you said, it kind of brings that sack upside, but Frankie Louvu is not Micah Parsons. So, I mean, I brought his total tackles but well below 100. Gave him a little bit of a bump on sacks, but when you hear that Micah Parsons role, and it's definitely, it gives me pause. And I actually, you know what? I mean, outside of, best balls in that big 3 scoring, with that big 3 scoring, he hasn't really been a target of mine. And, cause I didn't make the assumption, but I kind of had a figure, all right, Dan Quinn is maybe going to use Louvu as that Micah Parsons edge rusher, that off-ball linebacker that's going to rush the passer. So, and when you couple the fact that it's very man-heavy, and the LB2 doesn't get very many tackles, and when you couple him playing more on the edge, I think it's, you know what, it's Bobby Wagner, and then that's it. I'm going to move on.
Yeah. No, I'm 100% with you. I'm fine, with Wagner wherever, if he falls to me. I'm not typically drafting him as like top 10 right now, but that's where he's going. So I'm probably not ending up with a ton of Wagner, but Frankie Louvu, I'm definitely not ending up with much of him really at all. Like, unless he's got DL eligibility for sleeper, if they give him that, then you could plug him into your DL spot. Otherwise, I really don't care to have that type of usage in a weekly redraft league where you got to set your lineup every week and hope for big play production. So out on Frankie Louvu. All right, last division here. Let's talk about the NFC South. So we'll start with the Atlanta Falcons because kind of a messy group right now. We got Raheem Morris coming in, right? Caden Ellis, we saw him last year as a starter. We started to get Troy Anderson as a starter, and then he got hurt, and now there's a bit of a mix between Nate Landman and Troy Anderson for that LB2 role. So how are you kind of viewing, I guess, the Atlanta linebackers at this point?
With the Atlanta linebackers, so I know I've seen Nate Landman said, yeah, I'm getting the dot. When it's me and Caden Ellis, we're kind of rotating the dot, but when Ellis is off the field, I'm wearing it. I am under the assumption that when the regular season begins, that it's going to be Caden Ellis, because I think you need continuity on the defense, and I don't think you want two different people rotating with the green dot and rotating the messages and rotating calling the defense. So I don't think that is ideal. So I think I think Caden Ellis does end up getting it. And then honestly, I'm under the assumption that the LB2 is probably not going to have as much value as last year, because Raheem Morris comes from the Rams. He's been a notoriously dime heavy coordinator, single linebacker heavy coordinator. I mean, Jimmy Lake could bring his own philosophy, but I don't know. I think Raheem Morris might put his stamp on the defense. So at this point, I don't think the LB2 really is going to have a whole lot of value at this point. I think I've drafted Nate Landman as kind of like maybe a fifth or sixth or seventh linebacker, but at this point, I'm not actively targeting an LB2. So if I don't get Ellis, then I'm just not even going to worry about it.
Yeah, I agree. And I'm not even overly excited about Ellis. He's another guy that I'm likely going to move down in my next update. But Landman, deeper leagues only, really. We'll see what happens. Like you said, Jimmy Lake coming from the Rams too. He's a former assistant coach there, I guess.
Yep.
So there is potential that this is going to be a one linebacker system, in which case, I'm not overly interested in the Landmans or Troy Andersons of the world. And Caden Ellis, I'm just kind of tempering expectations just based on what we saw from him last year as a tackler.
11%. 11% tackle rate.
11% tackle rate's not good. Like it led to 24.6 tackles below expected. That was third percentile for the position. There's just better options out there.
Yep.
All right. The New Orleans Saints, we got Demario Davis and Pete Werner got a nice new contract this offseason, but they also brought in Willie Gay. They also brought in Khaliki Hudson. Khaliki Hudson buried on the depth chart just based on what we saw in the preseason. So really, the LB2 spot between Pete Werner and Willie Gay is kind of the bigger question mark. I wouldn't be surprised if we see a rotation here under Joe Woods. We've seen that in the past. Demario Davis, love him as an NFL linebacker, just kind of fine as an IDP, right? Like he's another one, like he's got a ridiculously low efficiency mark in each of the past 3 years now, where he's finished among the bottom of the league in tackles versus expected. Part of it is playing in a man heavy defense, but the tackles versus expected numbers take that into account, and he still finishes below expected. So these are not guys I'm overly excited for, but Demario Davis is a full-time player. I don't think there's much question about that. So he can be a starter for you, but how do you feel about Pete Werner or Willie Gay or anybody else on this Saints linebacker core?
I mean, Werner, you don't like to make the assumption, but I think Werner, you almost have to assume maybe got that LB2 role.
Yeah.
After with the contract. I mean, now that he's signed a contract, you want him on the field. You want to get a return on that investment. You want him on the field. So it sounds like he responded to the competition. So it sounds like even with those early reports, he has kind of staved off Willie Gay, but it's still two linebacker system 75% of the time. Three off-ball linebackers 20% of the time. So Werner could have that 80 to 85% snap share. But again, with three linebackers, I mean, it's you got does it cannibalize itself? But I mean, I have Werner kind of in a tier with KJ Britt, Jelani Taivai, and Mac Wilson. And with that tier, I'm probably targeting KJ Britt over somebody like Pete Werner. But I think you can almost, like I said, I think you can make that assumption that Werner's that contract extension kind of puts him in as the favorite to get that role. But how exciting is that?
Yeah.
I mean, Davis at least gives you a little bit higher of a ceiling with some of the big plays. He's had 6.5 sacks in consecutive seasons. I had him at 121 tackles. So I don't know if you're using like PFF numbers for tackles or, whatever.
Yeah.
I don't know what you're using, but I had him at about 121 tackles. So his highest number since 2017. And he just seems to be an Iron Man too. So, but the tackle efficiency, I will agree, has definitely, it's right around 11. It was right around 11% last year. So putting him in that LB3, LB4 territory.
Yeah. I'm using the PFF tackle numbers. I should state that. And they also don't include the tackles that players get credited for on sacks as well. So that takes like another 7 off for him. So they're slightly different, but they also, like I said, they don't include the sacks and stuff like that. So it's another one of those ones where, I'm fine with Demario Davis in leagues where you got to start 2-3 linebackers. Pete Werner going to be a little bit deeper league. So that's kind of, similarly to how we kind of treated these guys last year, I think is a fine way to look at it again this year. Carolina Panthers are interesting because they brought in Jose Jewell, who had his best season under the defensive coordinator here in Carolina, Ejiro Evero, when he was with Denver in 2022. We actually talked about Jose Jewell in the bounce back episode with Tripp back. I can't remember when it was, maybe June or May. But we both felt pretty good about Jose Jewell coming into this season just for his potential. But it's hard to know how much Shaq Thompson is going to play over him. Is it going to be a one linebacker defense again? Probably. But Carolina didn't play their starters in week 1, so we didn't really get a good sense of it. But they did play Clouden Sherrillis, who I'm sure everybody's familiar with.
Household name.
and rookie Trevin Wallace as well. So the one, I guess, telling sign from that preseason game was that Trevin Wallace actually came off the field on obvious passing downs. So I don't think it would be a surprise to see Evero have another one full-time linebacker and another sub-package option to replace LB2 on passing downs. We just don't know exactly who's going to be LB1 there. Like, it makes sense that Shaq Thompson could be that guy because he's been there before in Carolina, but missed all of last year. Evero brought in his guy, Jose Jewell. He was a full-time linebacker for him. I'm tempering expectations for LB2, but I don't know exactly who that is yet. So it's another one where I kind of want to see it in the preseason. So how do you, any better sense of who could be LB1 here for Carolina? How are you treating it?
I'm making the assumption that it's Thompson, just because he's the veteran. I mean, he's had that command of the locker room and he's got the veteran presence. And I think, from an intangible standpoint, I think the defense looks to him. So do you want to interrupt that? I still think Jose Jewell can be productive. I think, when you look at his PFF grades over, his time with Evero, he even could use him as, I guess, a lesser Frankie Louvu. I mean, Jewell had 145 pass rush snaps over the last 2 seasons, 23 quarterback pressures. So he does have a little bit of that experience in rushing the passer. So there is a little bit of that big play upside. 13% tackle rate, which isn't horrible. I mean, that's well above average. I think that's kind of puts him in an LB2, LB3 conversation if we know that he kind of can get a full-time role. 349 tackles in 3 of the last 4 seasons when he's been healthy. So, was the single linebacker due to injuries last year? So we'll also have to take a look at that. So, so they could use more of those 2 linebacker nickel packages, if they've got a healthy group. So, I think Trevin Wallace is a name to consider, but you did mention, I've already forgotten his name.
Clouden Sherrillis.
Yeah, Clouden Sherrillis. But, as of right now, I mean, even Shaq Thompson dealing with a camp injury. Jose Jewell has had his has had his battle of injuries. So, I think you can have Trevin Wallace in your in your in your kind of your watch list because he was the draft pick, pretty athletic. So, again, it is tough. You just kind of assume Shaq is going to be the guy because he's them in there. He's the grizzled vet.
Yeah. Yep, I agree. I think there's a very good chance that it's Shaq Thompson over Josie Jewell as far as snaps go. We'll see how things shake out here in the preseason and into the regular season. But yeah, I'm fine with either one of these guys late because they're not going to be like overly highly drafted players. Like these are pretty discounted players at this point, especially Shaq Thompson. If we're assuming a full-time role because he didn't play last year, so people have kind of forgotten about him. But I think there's potential for full-time snaps, and obviously we like that for production. So that's Carolina.
I think when you look at it again, a zone-heavy defense. I think the LB2 production and snap production was skewed just because of the injuries. But when you look at, when you look at potential tackle production, I don't know. It's not exciting. I think whoever gets that LB1 is going to be your target, and maybe that LB2 later on down the road.
Yep, makes sense. Last team on the list here, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, where we have the GOAT, Lavonte David. I love Lavonte David. And look, nothing really changes with Lavonte David. We've known what to expect from him for however many years now, whatever, 10, 12 years that he's been in the league. He's been consistent. He's been productive. He does everything that we could want for him. And he's never really like an overly highly priced linebacker either. But now, no Devin White, so it opens up the second linebacker role. You mentioned him earlier, KJ Britt. Feels like he's going to potentially step into an every down role this season. It's not a guarantee. We'll see how they value him, but I would bet at the very least it's a pretty sizable role that makes him another one of the better discounts to target this offseason in drafts or off the waiver wire, wherever you can, because it should be close to a full-time role in a good defense for linebacker production. I think KJ Britt going to be one of the better values this year, especially if he can hold on to that role for the entire season. So Lavonte David, we know, like I have him as LB9. I again, just love the potential for Lavonte David, even if it is his last year. But KJ Britt, somebody, in the later stages of drafts who I think could be a very sneaky value. How about you?
Yeah. I mean, it's a pretty consistent 2 linebacker system. And, he took over. I mean, he took over for White pretty much took over the Devin White's role last season.
Right.
I might bump up his projections a little bit. I'll probably bump him up to maybe 100, 120, 125 tackles. But yeah, primarily 2 linebacker system. The way the production is kind of shaken out, I think Lavonte David could easily hit 140, 150 tackles. But I think it's pretty simple. I think you target David first, and then Britt's definitely going to be that value breakout. That value breakout. Boy, that 2012 linebacker class had.
Oh, it's crazy.
I mean, you had Demario Davis, you had Luke Kuechly, Bobby Wagner, Lavonte David.
It's insane.
I mean, I think those are 4. I think you can make a case for. Obviously, those 3 are Hall of Famers. I think you can even make a case for Demario Davis as being a Hall of Famer. So I think you got 4 potential Hall of Famers out of that class.
Yeah, it was a really impressive group. I mean, yeah, it's hard to argue that. I mean, if you're looking like as far as linebacker Hall of Fame eligible players, like those 4. Pretty good bets, I would think.
I mean, just look at the longevity out of 3 of those 4 guys.
Insane,
and if Kuechly didn't get those concussions,
right?
I mean, it sucks. Lavonte David has just been so good, but Kuechly in those concussions just really sucked.
Yeah, that's probably the only question mark, right? Is just like these guys have all played since then and played at a high level and played full-time roles where, Kuechly's career was cut short, but he arguably played at a higher level than all of them
absolutely.
when he was in there, right? So
yeah, I mean, he's getting it. I mean, I think he's going to be on the ballot. I think he's a first ballot Hall of Famer.
Yeah, I think that's fair. So there you go. What better way to wrap up a linebacker episode with some Hall of Fame linebacker talk? But yeah, that's it, man. We went through linebacker situations for all 32 teams, for all you tackle heavy scoring folks out there. I really hope that was helpful for you all. If you still have questions or comments, feel free to drop them in the YouTube. I'll get to them as soon as I can, or reach out to Mike or I on the Twitter. But again, thank you all for tuning in. I know it was a long one, but appreciate you all who ride with us on these episodes. I appreciate you guys always doing that. And Mike, big thank you to you as well for coming on here, bringing your insight to the table. Always very much appreciated. So before you go, please let everybody know what else you got going on at the IDPshow.com this year.
Hey, I know we're at about 2 hours, but listen to us at 1.5 speed. You'll still get, you'll pick up everything. 1.5 speed, you'll still pick up everything. But yeah, again, over at the IDP show, Green Dot Linebacker article out now, constantly updated, projections being updated, and yeah, just I mean, week 1 right around the corner, right?
It's coming up. We got preseason week 2 this weekend. We're going to have a ton of information, hopefully, to come out of that. And I'll have all my kind of I guess I do have my preseason IDP rankings up now on PFF.com. You could check those out for free, but I'll be doing another update on those rankings prior to the start of the season. I'll also be doing a weekly preseason recap article, going over all the most IDP relevant information from the past week's worth of preseason games before we get into the regular season, and before the monster that is the weekly IDP report. I'll also drop my top IDP takeaways in video form as a YouTube exclusive these next couple of weeks for the preseason. So make sure to check that out as well. Next week, I'm going into my offense and IDP draft strategy. That was one of the I think one of the first videos we did for the PFF podcast feed last year for IDP, and you all seem to enjoy that. So we're going to run it back and go through all of that again.
What's that?
Yeah, we do cover offense every once in a while here on the PFF Fantasy Podcast, but obviously we love our IDP, and we've got a lot of people coming in for the IDP content. So I appreciate you guys all, and looking forward to doing this again. Mike, a big thank you to you again, and until next time.
Always love talking linebackers and IDP with you, John.
See you guys.